It's not a wild guess to say that a very high percentage of the thousands of people who tune into this show are political junkies, and probably a big piece of that number consider themselves progressives. So, with the Democratic convention coming up just a couple of weeks away, you'd think I was going to do a lot on that topic. Well, you're wrong, because conventions don't matter. And even more so, political platforms don't matter. And I say that as a bona fide elected delegate for Bernie Sanders, for whom I just already cast my virtual ballot for his nomination. So I'm going to get into that more in a moment. And then I'm going to talk with my guest today about a major crisis facing every single state, a crisis that will hurt people and a crisis that could be avoided. This is Jonathan Tassini, and welcome to the show for August 5th, 2020. As usual, a reminder, our major sponsor is the American Postal Workers Union, which fights for dignity, respect, and good wages for its 200,000 members and retirees and 2,000 private sector mail workers. Now, you too can become a sponsor of this show. You can do that in one of two ways. Either you can go over to workinglife.org, click on the podcast tab, and look for our link to Patreon, where you can become a one-time sponsor or a regular monthly sponsor at whatever level you can afford. Or, if you're more comfortable, you can use ActBlue. We've partnered with ActBlue, so you can just find us at ActBlue at the Working Life Network with Jonathan Tassini. You can see the link there, and you can become either a one-time sponsor or a regular monthly sponsor. Of course, we'd love if you became a regular sponsor. It helps us bring this show to you, and I think we're bringing you information you're not finding in most other places. Now, in a long piece that I wrote, which you can find posted at workinglife.org under the very subtle headline, "Get Your Heads Out of Your Collective Asses," because I do subtlety really well, I laid out some thoughts on why I thought progressives have squandered important energy, time, and resources obsessing about the Democratic convention. We have a golden opportunity to speak to the 30 to 50 million people who are now unemployed or underemployed because of the pandemic, who now have lost faith in the system. And this is a system that has screwed them for many, many decades, but people's eyes have really opened up because of the pandemic, or so I think. But because of the weakness of a segment of the progressive movement, especially those of us who have defined ourselves as part of the movement that's been inspired and has followed Bernie Sanders, we aren't taking full advantage of that chance and opportunity. Week after week since the pandemic erupted, while tens of thousands of people have been dying and millions are getting sick, and now tens of millions have lost enhanced unemployment benefits, thousands upon thousands of valuable organizing hours and energy were wasted on irrelevant party politics surrounding the Democratic Party convention. Now, quick, without searching the internet, tell me what was in the 2016 Democratic Party platform. What were the headings or the main resolutions? Now, no one can actually answer that question because party platforms are irrelevant. I actually was at the 2016 Platform Committee debate, and honestly, I can remember a few issues, mainly the fight over the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal, because I was involved in the national opposition to this odious deal. But as far as the rest of the platform, I would wager 95% of the people who were actually at that debate could not tell you what was in the final platform. Millions of people who could be drawn into the movement don't give a damn about party platforms or rules fights or conventions, all of which is of interest to a microscopic sliver of political activists. Millions of people are trying to keep the lights on or just a roof over their heads, and yet a majority of Bernie Democratic Party delegates have been focused on entirely meaningless platform committee meetings. Now, by playing the platform game and the related fight over party rules, progressives have played right into the hands of the very quote-unquote establishment that so many rage against. This is the establishment's arena. They have the votes at the convention. And here's the bigger point. No president ever made a decision based on a party platform. The platform debate and the debate over the rules is really the purview of what I call the meal ticket activists. People who are angling for jobs, foundation money, some sort of illusory cult-like influence, who desperately want to be on the task forces or committees, all entities that will have virtually no lasting influence. Or these are people who simply want to rage about how unfairly they've been treated. The fight over the Medicare for All platform issue is just one example that I would point out in a long list of missed opportunities. As I wrote recently in a piece for the New York Daily News, what a colossal waste of energy. It was obvious the votes were overwhelmingly against Medicare for All. So was the exercise simply to make headlines or feel superior knowing you would not win? Because progressives could have chosen a much better, politically advantageous path that sidesteps the insider game in favor of actually a national appeal about Medicare for All to a desperate country. Because right at this moment, there is a bicameral, meaning both in the House and Senate, pandemic bill that has been introduced called the Healthcare Emergency Guarantee Act. It is sponsored by a significant group of House members, including Karen Bass, who's rumored to be a contender for vice president, and in the Senate, lo and behold, Bernie Sanders. Now, if passed, the bill would enroll millions of Americans into Medicare, any of the roughly 35 million unemployed who will lose their employer-based health care and have no other health care coverage because of the pandemic. And it's also going to allow, this bill would, people currently insured but not insured in a broad enough sense and paying way too much. Now, think about that. With one step, a huge percentage of the people would benefit for the first time from Medicare coverage. They would see great savings to their ravaged pocketbooks and experience that ease of use in getting care. That experience could then turn into an almost unstoppable political force for implementing Medicare for All across the nation at some point, maybe even quite soon. Politically, organizing to push the bill, community by community, is a winner. Joe Biden's wing of the party would be in a much more difficult position arguing against a short-term, pandemic-tied Medicare for All option. After all, he and the party have made Donald Trump's abject failure at managing the pandemic a central part of the election campaign. And that failure has been underscored by the threat to the health of people, many of whom died or became unnecessarily significantly ill from the coronavirus because they could not afford to go to a doctor. Now, even if the bill fails to pass, given the certain opposition from Mitch McConnell and a lack of support to date from Nancy Pelosi, progressives leading such a national campaign would leave in place a far more robust, long-lasting imprint among people about the benefits of Medicare for All. A large share of the blame of this debacle sits with a consistent cadre of entrenched organizations and a small circle of folks who curry favor with donors and send out fundraising emails which fan the anger of grassroots activists by hyping the fight against the quote-unquote establishment, even though those very organizations have a pretty bad track record littered with ineptitude and frankly just empty sloganeering. We only win when we fight based on organization and mobilizing. Does anyone think a single Black Lives Matter activist asked whether she or he should mass in the streets based on the party platform or what Joe Biden thinks about Black Lives Matter? You think a single person who was marching in the most exciting uprising underway in recent times even knows what the party platform says, either on Black Lives Matter, racial justice, or anything? The answer is obviously no. And if you hear a progressive leader say roughly, we can do all of this at the same time, here's one thing you can know. That person has no clue about strategy. And you might as well look at his or her actual track record, not some cultish devotion. And they have no idea about the real struggles of actual people in the streets. Most people today are struggling on multiple fronts, trying to keep themselves and their families safe and healthy, looking for a job, and navigating an entirely different life, especially folks who have kids at home. They don't have time for all this activism. They barely have a smidgen of time to make a phone call. Only the meal ticket activists see a world where people somehow can juggle the insanity of today and devote more energy to activism. So, as I've said many times, we should mostly ignore the Democratic Party convention. Let it happen. If you want, tune in online, but then organize up to and including a general strike for real things. On this show, for example, I outlined a few weeks ago something I call a Beat the Pandemic and Aid the People $6.5 trillion stimulus act. That's the only way to control the pandemic. Shut down the country for at least a month and order people into their homes. We can do so by making sure people staying at home earn an actual paycheck, can pay the bills, and then come out on the other end without crushing debt. We should be organizing for that, not around a meaningless party platform. Or we could organize around the idea of making sure everybody gets a free vaccine. Or for the safety and health of workers who are confronting the worst safety and health crisis for workers in generation. Now, I'm not guaranteeing we can win the stuff that I'm in favor of. It's a hard hill to climb. But Black Lives Matter activists were not deterred by confronting centuries-old racism head-on in the streets. And overnight, that activist courage and energy has advanced concrete, real, anti-racist efforts. Now, of course, there's a long way to go, but what a change there's been in such a short time. And they've made far more change than the years of progressive carping and whining about the unfair quote-unquote establishment. And in that organizing, we would already be building what will be an obvious need to have a progressive counter to a Biden administration's actual policies. It will actually enhance the ability to defeat, as Bernie Sanders has always held is an important goal and has correctly said so ever since he began his 2020 campaign, to defeat the most dangerous president in our lifetimes and make the Republican Party a rump presence in the country, and then turn our attention to changing the Democratic Party and getting rid of those very establishment types who are turning over the country to corporate lobbyists and the elite. Let's act like organizers responding to people's real needs.